Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth, another podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. My name is Dr. Leslie Phillips, and I'll be your host for the next hour. And of course, Corey's also here in the studio.
Hello, everyone.
And today the topic is going to be about stress and anxiety and how to cope with it. Because we've had a lot of listeners. We always have a lot of listeners writing in about that because we're seeing so many stressful events happening in the world. So we have a really great guest to introduce to you today who is an expert in the field of stress and anxiety. And I will introduce her in a moment. But if you are someone who's tuning into the show for the very first time, let me just explain Unlocking Your Truth. It's a talk show. It's about metaphysics and spirituality and healing and all things under that kind of umbrella. And every week we normally have a different discussion topic. And we also like to answer listeners' questions as well. So our guest today is a lady called Peggy Silfon. And she is going to, like I mentioned, share her insights into how to become self-empowered and dismantle patterns of stress and anxiety. And she wants to help shed some light on how mind and ego can control your life in unproductive ways and give you some tips on how to change your reality. Now, Peggy is an internationally known expert on helping people to overcome stress, fear, and anxiety. And she has developed some of her own protocols in how to do that, based on her own life experience. And she spends her time guiding business groups and individuals in how to improve their productivity, their performance, and address issues in health, relationships, work, and life purpose. All of the things we like to talk about on this show, actually. So welcome to the show, Peggy. It's great to have you on.
I am delighted to be here with both of you. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about how you came to be an expert in stress and anxiety and how it's played a role in your life.
How much time do we have for the show? It's been a long journey. I started out in New York City, grew up there, and I worked as a journalist. And I was working for the New York Times, Newsweek International, and I had so much stress. And I was always going through these cycles where I would hit these highs, I'd feel great, productive, creative, and then I'd hit bottom. And so I really believe so much of what we grow and learn personally comes from out of a need to really cope with the adversity that comes up in our lives. And for me, I would have a motorcycle accident because I would commute around New York City on a motorcycle. I would get the flu. I would have terrible spasms in my back or my neck. So I was constantly getting these symptoms that were knocking me down, out for the count, and constantly I was going through these cycles. So I began needing, just for my own survival, to find solutions. And I actually began certifying in many of the different protocols that I now use. And that it's a blend of both Eastern and Western traditions. And I'm so passionate about the relief that it can provide for people that I really changed my course about 15 years ago and began really just helping others. And now I help people around the world. And it's terribly gratifying to be able to show people how they don't have to suffer. There are choices and solutions.
Well, that's fantastic. And you've written a number of books on the subject, haven't you?
Yes, I have. My bestseller is actually Escape from Anxiety, Supercharge Your Life with Powerful Strategies from A to Z. And that has over 100 different strategies for literally interrupting these patterns of stress and anxiety that can be very crippling and paralyzing and really inhibit us from being fully in our lives. And then I also just recently compiled the teachings of world-renowned spiritual master Yogi Amrit Desai. And that book is embodying the power of the zero stress zone. And that has been life changing for me. That was one of my first forays into understanding personal development and just the understanding of the zone and how to access it consciously. So it's taken about 10 years to actually produce the book, working with Yogi Desai, but it's been really a beautiful experience. And I'm very excited because I'm about to release it as an audio book. So that should be out in probably the next month.
Oh, that's fantastic. And we'd like to ask you about both of those books, and maybe starting with the first one that you mentioned, Escape from Anxiety, because you mentioned that you share over 100 techniques that people can use to potentially help them to let go of stress and anxiety. What would be your favorite techniques that you've outlined in the book, and why? Which are the ones perhaps that have worked for you, or which are the ones that you find to be most successful with people? And why is it necessary to offer 100 different ways? Is it because everybody's different?
That's such an interesting question. What I have found is that no one way is the solution, except that what resonates with different people tend to be different, and what someone can use consistently in their life tends to be different. So having 100 different choices can really help people find what really works for them. Because it's great to have all these tools in your toolbox, but if they sit there and rust, it's not going to do anyone any good. So it's being able to find ways that you can really integrate in your life. And for instance, one of my clients was having terrible panic attacks, so much so that every other week before she came to me, she was literally going to urgent care thinking she was having heart attacks. And so when I began to work with her, she was so overwhelmed, frenzied, that I had to really develop a simple first step for her. And the simplest was to teach her a very easy breathing technique that would help her just calm her nervous system and take her out of that panic attack immediately. And so that is one of my favorites. I actually would love to offer your listeners a free audio if they just want to visit 3minutes2destress.com, the numeral 3. They can download that 3-minute audio and just use it every day. Use it first thing in the morning, or if you're feeling frazzled in the middle of the afternoon, stop for 3 minutes and just use that. And it will help just calm that nervous system to the point where you regain control. So in the book, the way I've developed it is literally from A to Z. So for instance, if someone like my client was having a panic attack, she could open to any letter of the alphabet and just pick one thing to do. And that will just help interrupt that pattern for that moment. And then to develop more sustainable relief, it's really about finding 1, 2, or 3 of those strategies that specifically work for you that you can incorporate into your life every single day. And that's what it really takes, is being able to use it regularly.
Mm-hmm.
I studied under Richard Bandler, the co-founder of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming.
I'm certified in that too.
And I love what he says about it. I like what he says. Like, if you're Batman and you only have one thing in your pouch, well, if that doesn't work, you're pretty well out of luck. And same thing when you're working with people. If they come in to be helped, and you can only do one thing, like Reiki or any of the wonderful, I'm not putting any of them down, but if you can only do one thing, and that person's not receiving or reacting or changing or working with that, then you're not giving them the best care that you can. And I find you actually almost quote me, or I quote you, or we quote him, and that everything, almost like 99.99% of what can go wrong with a human being is choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think for myself, I didn't understand that when I was in New York City, and I didn't realize that I had choices, that I could change what was happening, even to the point where we can change our thoughts. And our thoughts are so powerful in terms of how we perceive the world we live in. And when our thoughts are depleting and negative, and we're constantly reinforcing those patterns, that becomes our reality. And most people think, well, I'm just stuck. This is what it is. And they're not really looking at the whole reality, nor do they realize they can change their thoughts just by shifting. Instead of reacting to, well, I hate that, be able to just look at that as, wait, that is over there. I don't have to like it or dislike it. I can just accept it as it is and move on to the next activity. Right. So it's allowing ourselves to be empowered to A, be mindful and recognize that we have choices, and then B, make those choices that help fill us up, that help give us that empowerment.
And that's even with phobias too. I mean, phobias are strictly a choice. How the brain looks at any given aspect of your life, like spiders or going over through tunnels or any of these things. People react to it because that's how the mind sees, or that belief system that the mind has. They see that specific event as being frightening, and the mind can choose something else. The mind does not have to be frightened of that particular instance.
Exactly. It's interesting. I've also been trained in neurosciences, and what we're seeing in the neurosciences is that those patterns of reactions literally get grooved into our neural pathways. So these neurons that fire together, wire together, and it becomes something that we just have an automatic, unconscious reaction. And what we are realizing now is we can rewire the brain, and there's this wonderful understanding of brain plasticity that allows us to really change those old habits that aren't working for us and introduce new habits and actually have them more sustainable so that we don't have to keep going through this suffering.
Mm. So what is the first step for somebody if they want to become the neutral observer of their reality, if they want to be able to take a step aside from those thought patterns and start to retrain their brain? What's your recommendation for doing that?
The first step is awareness, mindfulness, really paying attention on purpose and realizing when you're in reaction to something. In fact, I was just working with a client last night who gets very triggered by loud noises. She has post-traumatic stress disorder, and so someone yelling in the distance triggers her to feel that she's not safe. So the first thing is becoming aware. Do I need to react to this person yelling? Am I in danger? Or am I safe? It's just a person yelling at his wife. It has nothing to do with me. I don't need to react to this in this moment. So it's about conditioning and developing that awareness so that you're recognizing that you're reacting to some stimulus, and then realize that you have a choice. You can respond instead and just accept it. And again, understand that sometimes we need to react. Sometimes we are in danger. So, and that's what that whole mechanism, this biological fight or flight in our brains is designed for, to keep us safe. But we have now over-programmed it to the point where it's activating all the time, and we're always experiencing these stress hormones coursing through our bodies, which is not healthful for long periods. So no. First is awareness. Second is making a different choice.
Right. And I mean, that reactivity that you're talking about, it can be so ingrained and it can happen so automatically. And so, yes, it's important to develop awareness, but for somebody who's in that experience right now, how can they develop that awareness? What would you say to them?
So, I think it's very clear that people develop symptoms. There are signs. One client I was working with was having panic attacks. Another client I was working with developed insomnia. He just couldn't sleep. He thought he was losing his business. Everything would fall apart. His wife would leave him and he'd lose his home. So he worried, and the worry kept him up at night. So there are these signs. If you have exaggerated worries, if you're reacting to everything, or you're finding yourself just sad all the time, these are just signs and symptoms that you are in that fight or flight response, and you need to change it. You need to calm the nervous system. You need to quiet down. And sometimes I work with clients and tell them, especially clients who worry a lot, and let's face it, there's a lot to worry about these days because there's a lot going on in our world, globally and personally. So we do need to pay attention, but not to the point where we are so caught up in worry that we cannot see solutions. We get paralyzed by that energetic tension of worry, and it shuts down the functioning of the body. So we can't see any resolution to anything, and we just stay in that fight or flight reaction. So
right.
It's paying attention to the signs and the symptoms, and you know if you're not feeling right, you know if you're getting headaches a lot, or just not able to cope with everyday challenges, paying your bills become a big ordeal. You know those things. So as soon as you become aware of it, it's really helpful to recognize that you don't have to live in that state. You can change it. So one of the solutions is very simply tabling your worry to a specific time. So let's say you say 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to spend a half hour worrying on all of these things. So as these incidents or stimulus come up that you're becoming worried about, go ahead and write them down, but you're not allowed to think about them until 10 o'clock that next morning. So it begins to condition you to let go of the worry for certain periods and allocate it to a certain time frame. Does that make sense to you?
Yep. I understand what you're saying. So, first of all, it's just take a step back from your life and assess what's going on, and then catch yourself in the act. So give yourself catch yourself in the act and stop yourself from doing it all day long, and just set aside a time every day to do it. So yes, that does make sense. So listeners, you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie, and we are broadcasting on CIVL on 101.7 FM. Today we've been talking to Peggy Silfon about anxiety and stress and how to deal with it. We're going to take a short break right now, and we'll be back after these few short messages. Hello listeners, and welcome back to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. And you're listening to us on CIVL on 101.7 FM. And you can also live stream us on civl.ca and catch the podcast on drlesliephillips.com. Today's show...
Just a quick intercession. When some people have tried to, I've got some emails that people have tried to email, live stream, they couldn't find it. When you go onto the website, civl.ca, there's a big ear there. Press the ear.
Great. Thanks, Corey. So today's show, we've been talking about stress and anxiety. And we have a guest who's been talking to us about that. There's a lady called Peggy Silfon who's written some books about stress and anxiety. And we've been picking her brains for some tips and tricks about how to cope with that. And so tell us some more tips and tricks that you might recommend. So before the break, we were talking about how the very first step is to become aware that you are stressed out in the first place. And then to be able to just monitor yourself throughout the day and pick and pick yourself before, as you find yourself reacting, and stop yourself reacting and save it all for one, big lump early in the morning or at the end of the day to be dealt with. So what other, tips do you have for our listeners who are having trouble dealing with stress?
So it really helps to enter a place of integration, which is the place where mind and body really return back to that integrated source of being that's inborn within us. That's our true essence. So one easy way to do it, or I think easy, maybe some people will be challenged by it, is yoga, using a physical movement, which is a direct connection to the body, acting as a link to the power of the presence. And it helps us to really get in tune and in touch. It's not only physically beneficial as an exercise, but it's also integrating in terms of being able to really feel what's going on in the body and interrupt, again, those patterns of stress or anxiety. One of my favorite forms is actually Yoga Nidra, which I'm also certified in. And Yoga Nidra is a yogic sleep that takes you into very deep levels of relaxation, into alpha, theta, even delta states. And these are the states you go into when you go to sleep at night. So just 20 minutes of this guided experience is equivalent to about 3 to 4 hours of deep restorative sleep. So it's really an extraordinary experience. And I've used this with a lot of clients who have physical illnesses or they're terribly overwhelmed by things. And this allows them to go into these deep levels of relaxation. It's another interrupter that is like taking the morning time period to think about worries or to just focus in on that. But this really just separates you out, and it allows you to really restore, renew, revitalize, and even regenerate. And so it's done. So many people tell me, oh, I don't do yoga. I'm not flexible. So I ask them, well, can you sit in a chair or lie on your back? Oh, yes, I think I can do that. That's all you have to do for Yoga Nidra. And then you just follow this guided journey that takes you just into this blissful place that we might consider the zone, but it's this wonderful, beautiful place of peace and harmony, which really activates dormant healing powers in your own body. And it just connects you to your authentic self in a way that is so empowering. It really helps you get more in touch with your intuitive impulses to really be able to trust that guidance system. So it's one of my favorite things, and it was really what started me on this journey and connected me to a place within myself that I had thought really didn't exist anymore, that it was something from childhood that was long gone. And to me, it was such an amazing experience. So I think that's a really powerful way to connect.
So is that a practice where the person is taking a break from their reality momentarily? Or is it a practice where are they, because you said it helps you connect with yourself as spirit, but it also helps you heal the body.
Absolutely.
Is it giving the body a break from the consciousness while you do this, or are you staying connected with the body?
You are conscious, which is kind of interesting, and yet you're allowing yourself to be detached from judgment. You're entering that witness consciousness of just being. So you shift from thinking and doing, which is what we spend our lives caught up in, to really just feeling and being. And when you do that, you connect to your spirit self, and your body has a chance to really relax to the point where your channels and meridians are opened. You're really restoring and renewing in a way that allows the healing to happen in your body and your mind. So mentally, you find yourself seeing solutions after you've done a Yoga Nidra experience, where before you may have only seen problems. So it really shifts you into a different consciousness, which is truly where your soul resides, where the essence of you is. And so it is such a remarkable experience. And the more you do it, the more benefit you get. So For instance, with one of my clients who had terrible insomnia, this was a fantastic solution for him because without the sleep, he was not only not able to think clearly and not make good decisions, but he was gaining weight. He was really on that road to having a heart attack or a stroke. And this just calmed his nervous system. It put him back in the driver's seat. He became CEO of his brain power again, where he had lost all of that before. So it's a really remarkable, powerful technique, and it comes from the ancient wisdom teachings.
Well, that sounds great. Now, I was reading some information about you, and there was another technique that you were talking about called pratyahara. Can you explain what that is and how that might help?
Sure. That is actually from embodying the power of the zero stress zone. And pratyahara is actually a Sanskrit term, and it's really about withdrawing attention from your first reaction. So our first reaction is time-bound, that resurfaces in the form of a reaction to the present because of something that happened in the past usually. And some of these reactions are necessary for our very survival, like you want to take your hand off of a hot stove so you don't burn. But it's more about emotional reaction. So let's say you have a project that you need to get finished and, oh my goodness, you missed the deadline. So you might react with, I'm just not good enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm just no good. And that reaction often comes from pre-programming, from conditioning, from a childhood message, a parent who maybe said, oh, you'll never amount to anything. And you've carried that message through. It's become part of your belief system about yourself. So when you become aware of that reaction, when you hear yourself self-sabotaging yourself with, I'm no good, you can stop that reaction and that pattern of behavior. And that's when you enter into more of what we call a choiceless awareness, where you just choose to respond instead. And that really frees you. I'll tell you a quick story. I play competitive tennis, and I was on a team, and I was playing at night and I was playing singles, which I hadn't been playing in a while. And I don't like playing at night. I wasn't really feeling up to playing singles. I had had a long day. I was playing on red clay, and I was playing a woman who was 20 years younger, and I was self-destructing. I was hearing my thoughts saying, I hate playing at night. I hate playing on red clay. I shouldn't have accepted this. Why did I agree to do singles? I'm not good enough to play this woman. Oh, she's so much younger. I can't do this. And I was playing miserably. And I finally realized, what am I telling myself? And I changed it. And I just started telling myself that I'm a person of great value. I'm an expression of the divine. And that just filled me up. And I was able to just continue reciting that to the point where it was a 3-hour match. I should have been falling down, and I won. And it wasn't about winning. It was really about changing my thoughts and changing my behavior and using pratyahara, really recognizing that I needed to withdraw attention from that first reaction of, I hate this. And we all have those choices. That's what's so amazing when we step back into our humanness and realize, yes, we have human vulnerabilities, and we also have all of these amazing choices that allow us to be our best selves.
Oh, it's very interesting. It's very true. I mean, most people are their own worst enemy in essence when it comes to that. Their minds actually, not their personage. So we do a lot of, we work a lot on a spiritual / metaphysical level as well. How would you relate what we're talking about today about, the stress relief and things on a spiritual note in like with people questioning their paths, wondering how to get to the next level. Of course, the wonderful search for enlightenment and generally like that.
That's a great question. It really comes back to allowing ourselves to enter into our fullness. Stress and anxiety block the path to our soul. Our soul is really unblemished and pure. But stress and anxiety throw us into that survival mode, activating those parts of the brain that were meant only for short bursts. So when our energy gets depleted, our mind is overwhelmed, we end up with all these symptoms and exaggerations of just manifestations of indigestions and headaches, and we're out of balance. And when we're out of balance, we lose touch with our spirit self. And so it's really about coming back to that integration of mind and body, releasing the stress and anxiety, which is not serving us, and allowing ourselves to return back to that integrated source of being that's inborn within us, that was here. We're the changeless soul. It was here before we were born, and it'll be here after we leave our physical bodies. So we need to find that direct connection to return back to that link to the power of our presence.
So you were saying that your latest book, Embodying the Power of the Zero Stress Zone, is a compilation of teachings of renowned spiritual master Yogi Amrit Desai. And so could you tell us more about that book and maybe give us a couple of other examples of some of the powerful teachings that a reader might discover if they were to purchase a copy of the book?
It really encompasses over 50 years of yoga, the true meaning of yoga. And we in North America have really taken yoga as an exercise. And sure, it feels good, but we've lost the true essence of what it is. And what it is really connecting to that divine potential within and using our physical body, integrating it with our minds in a way that's very productive. And that's really a lot of what the book is about. It's about shifting from knee-jerk automatic reactions in life to really being more conscious, really being more witness, and really entering into the divine potential. And one of the techniques that's used is a quantum breath meditation technique, and that's included in the book to really guide you into this inner space, this domain of grace that allows you to really be fully vested in your life right now and really be at your peak performance in every aspect of your life. So it has a little bit of everything in terms of the understanding. And Yogi Amrit Desai comes from Gujarat, India, so he comes from a lineage that is very empowering and really changes our understanding of ourselves in a lot of ways. And one of the key points is to really shift into our feeling center. We so often just function in our minds, and the mind runs away and the ego takes over. And this allows us to learn how to really be more integrated in our feeling center. And a lot of it is done through the trainings using third eye integration. So the third eye is in the middle of the brow center, in the middle of the forehead, the pineal gland, basically, which is our connection to our higher self, to our spirit selves. And by using that, combined with breath and being quiet and allowing ourselves to sort of take what I call a productivity pause or a time out, it allows us to connect to that higher place within ourselves that is really truly our source. And it is so much more expansive and infinite than we realize. We limit ourselves. And this book really helps you recognize how to let go of all the boundaries and really be so much more in your divine potential now, in this moment.
So how much of this are you able to take into the corporate setting? So I know I myself, I teach meditation. I teach people how to activate their third eye and use their clairvoyance and all of those things. And I also teach meditation in the corporate setting. And I know for myself, if I'm teaching a group of private clients, I tend to use different language than if I'm in the corporate setting. And so I just wondered whether it's the same for you, whether you kind of alter the way that you're talking and the language that you're using so that it becomes more accessible in a business environment than in a group of people who are already into this stuff.
Absolutely. I'm so happy you're doing all the things you're doing. We so need it. And yes, absolutely. It's funny. One of the things I actually teach is a public speaking course, a communications course, and it's really about knowing your audience first. If you use language that they're not going to respond to, your message is going to get completely lost. So when I speak to corporate groups, I did a keynote talk to 200 CEOs from around the United States. And what I found that I needed to do was give them a context for what I was going to share with them. So I put it into very real terms, and I used some of the science so that they could sort of grasp in their logical, linear minds, many who had not really had any spiritual experiences or meditation or anything like that. And I, in corporate settings, rarely call it meditation, although meditation is becoming much more commonplace. But I call it a productivity pause. I call it a timeout. I call it an interrupter, to interrupt those brain patterns that are not effective, that are really holding us back and causing these imbalances. And so you interrupt that pattern and you change it. And I visually show them this concept of how these cycles of behavior get grooved, and we just keep defaulting to the same old pattern. We get stuck in traffic and we get annoyed and aggravated, and that becomes the default pattern, instead of realizing I don't need to be aggravated because it's not going to change the traffic, and I'm not feeling very good being tense and aggravated about the traffic. So once again, you have a choice, you can change it. So I tried to put it in very real terms, and I also share a lot of client stories because they're real, and it helps people identify with parts of themselves that they might see in a client and what a client has experienced and the resolution for the client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds good. So, I mean, yeah, I don't talk about, now we're going to activate your third eye.
Right,
we
right.
talk about, here's a technique that can help you increase your clarity and your focus.
Right, absolutely, of course.
Yeah.
But in some situations, you would talk about activating the third eye. It just depends who the group might be, because I've had groups like that as well, which are fun.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it might be a good time for us to take another break, and after the break, I think Corey might have some listeners' questions to
You must be psychic.
Pose to us. So everyone, you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie, and we've had a guest, Peggy Sealfon, who has been talking to us about stress, anxiety, but beyond stress, anxiety, spirituality and connecting with our true selves and letting go of all of these dense levels of ego and habits we get into with our minds that don't serve us. So after the break, we'll be back and we'll be posing some more questions to Peggy. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy these few advertisements. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. My name is Dr. Leslie Phillips, and I am here in the studio today with Corey and our guest, Peggy. And we've been talking about stress and anxiety. We've been talking about how you can connect with your spiritual self and your higher source and all things in between. And so, Corey, do we have some listeners' questions that would be apt to pose to Peggy?
More or less. Again, most of our questions come in on a spiritual or a metaphysical base, but I have three here that might pertain. So the first one is from Sonia. And Sonia says or asks, I have worked extremely hard to attain the job I have now. However, I feel as though I could be more, and be more is in quotation marks. Circumstances have placed my life at a haunt, or a halt, I think she wanted to say. And I'm a single mother to a special needs child, places limitations on things I would like to do. In order to achieve financial stability, to be able to support me and my child, my personal life has been going hasn't been going very well either. It usually never is, which I have accepted, in which I have decided to try and focus my energies in other areas of my life. If you can tell me why I feel as though the last 2 years of my life have been overclouded with extreme hardships, causing disorders such as fear, anxiety, and major depression, so much to the point that I feel as though I'm in a period of stagnation with regard to achieving all that I desire.
So how can you help our listener, Peggy?
What an incredible story. So it really comes back to one of the key things I heard there is that things are sort of never good for her, was one of the expressions I heard. And I hear a core belief that is where she needs to start to change. And she needs to believe in her expansiveness, in her potential. And she needs to reach out. There's people in her community, there's family, there's friends, there's people who can support her on her path. I think part of it may be that she's not clear what her path is yet. She has a job, but does she have a passion? And yes, I understand she has bills to pay and she has a challenged child. And so there are a lot of needs that she has. However, you cannot give to anyone else what isn't flowing through you. So she needs to start with herself and really develop her empowerment, her self-reliance, and her sense of what she really wants to do in her life and what she wants to give to her child, give to her community, give to the universe. So it really starts by looking within herself. I would also recommend some self-care things for herself to feel good. If she likes warm Epsom salt baths, to do that with some essential oils in it, to take some time to really nurture herself in a way that allows her to feel more in control of her life. It sounds right now like she's a victim, and that victim mentality is very depleting and creates only struggle. She can change that, and it just starts by making that choice and believing that it can all change, and taking one small, in neuro-linguistic programming, we talk about chunking. So it just begins with one small step, and just take that step to make that difference. And that step might just be doing something wonderful and nurturing for herself every day, just starting with that.
Thank
Good
you.
answer, yeah. Dr. Leslie, you have any comments?
I might have to get you to read the question out again.
We'll go to the next one then. I agree with you, by the way. I think for this lady, me time is very critical, because it sounds like she's not living in the present whatsoever. She's in the present and being battered, but wanting to be somewhere else.
She's living in her problems, and she's creating more problems. You know, energy follows attention. And so when you put your attention into those negative thoughts of woe is me, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm not doing what I want, that becomes your whole reality. So in order to shift out of it, you have to change how you're thinking about it.
When I look at her energy, it does look to me like she's in the process of shifting and changing. And part of the the shift is exactly like you're saying, to let go of feeling like she's a victim and feeling like life is something that's done to her, that's dealt to her, and to take responsibility for her own life and the fact that she creates her own reality by realizing that. And to me, just to end on a positive note, it looks to me like she is moving and shifting in that direction. That her energy is in motion. Doesn't look like it's completely stuck. So, keep going, keep focusing on the positive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, on to our next question. Next question is from Tanya. And Tanya says, I'm feeling out of sorts and scattered and uneasy about the current path I seem to be walking or dragging myself along with something something feels off with my mentor, yet I don't know if it is just my doubt or disillusionment and loving heart that yearns for it to be more. I've been losing my mind in some ways, hearing spirit and my intuition, yet being unable to act accordingly for fears of disappointment and not approving of myself. I'm not sure how to move, and I'm concerned that I have made some very extreme errors in my dealings and handling my finances. Maybe my doubt and fear is the largest my doubt and my fear are of the largest transformation I've done. There's no punctuation. I've done into yet I feel the outsourcing my healing may be blocking me from really aligning and being able to live in a good way. I would really appreciate your guidance. So it sounds like what's happening with this lady is that has somebody she's working with, but she feels like she should be working on it.
Yes, connecting directly with source, like she's giving her power away to her advisor as opposed to connecting directly with source.
And it also sounds like Tanya's caught in that downward spiral where she's feeling scattered and dragging. And it sounds as if she's actually going through a transition. And yet there's a comment she made about extreme errors, financial errors. And it's really important for her to be present in the now and not be bounded by past decisions. What's past is past, and it's really about being in the present, taking care of the present so that you can create the future that you want. But it's being really mindful about now.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It does look like all of those things that she said are based on past time events, past time
and
beliefs.
I feel too like she needs to trust herself. I feel like she is deferring some things, and because of the past, as you just reiterated, it's holding her back from really being able to trust herself because she made this error. Let it go. What's done is done. Be now and be powerful now because it's all there. It's all waiting to be tapped into. So it's just opening the door.
Yeah, she's got some energy that's coming in her crown chakra that's coming in between her and source energy or a higher information. And it looks to me like that's connects with her childhood and perhaps events where she was criticized or critiqued or said to be wrong. So she looks like she was criticized a lot, and her information was not validated by the people around her. So she's got a little bit of an old pattern there that's creating that block. But as Peggy says, this is all stuff that you can let go of. You can find a way to let it go.
Okay, good. We have time for one more question, and I also have a little comment from one of our listeners, and JL says, I listened to your podcast about my favorite past life. It was great. I looked it up, and I'm actually born a day after King Louis XV. He's also the king that made France broke, which explains the wonderful lifestyle at the time. We spent all the money.
I can't remember. I don't think we said she was Louis XV, did we? I think we just.
Yeah, well, it could be. I'm not sure, but she liked her reading online. Sometimes we do readings online, Peggy, and she enjoyed that one.
Fabulous.
So this is one from Lynn, and Lynn says, lately I've been having peculiar sleep dream patterns. I find that my astral body has been vibrating when I'm asleep, and I feel some outside forces trying to get me out of my body and travel with them. One time I went with it, and I found myself with this man in this unearthly realm. Another time I felt a group of people moving my feet and hands. I'm not sure how to interpret or even how to react to this experience. Do you have any advice? I don't know if this is in your realm, Peggy, or not, but you can go right ahead if you'd like.
That's a really interesting experience. I mean, it does sound as if energetically she's moving more into a spirit state and she's being more susceptible to some other possibly entities. It's not exactly my realm, although I am clairsentient, so I do tend to have certain intuitions that can sometimes guide people. I would also just look at her sleep patterns, and if it's something that she's enjoying and it's working for her, then go with it and revel in it. But if it's disturbing to her, then she might want to look at other sleep habits, perhaps, that might be more conducive to not allowing this kind of vibrational energy. So it just depends how she's responding to it, because it could be wonderful. It could be a fabulous nighttime adventure that she travels through. And if it's disturbing and depleting and she wakes up exhausted in the morning, then she needs to reconsider. And it may also be nutritionally something she needs to look at, something she might be eating at night that is contributing to this energetic shifting in her body. So,
to me, a lot of people choose to, even in their dreams, to choose the fear. I've never had a nightmare in my whole life. I've had things I could call a nightmare, but I never chose to call them nightmares because I just think they're great stories. They're just wonderful.
Right, they are.
So she didn't say she was frightened, did she? Although
no.
A bit about the arms and the legs. But when I look at at least the journey to the other realm that she talked about, that looks like a positive experience to me. And so I would just say it's about discernment and setting your intentions that you're going to experience the light. So you're going to experience have positive experiences in your astral travel. And but to me, some of it looks pretty positive to me that's happening to her.
I felt that too.
Yeah.
She talked about the unearthly realm.
Yeah.
But it wasn't out of fear. It was more out of questioning, well, what does this mean? So she's looking for understanding of the experience.
Exactly. Right. And we've done a couple of shows at least on out of body experience. And so, she can go to our podcasts and Google astral travel, or put in the search box astral travel or out of body experience or dream experience. And I'm sure that you'll find 2 or 3 podcasts on that you can listen to that will give you a lot more information about what's happening on a spiritual level. In your out-of-body experiences. Hopefully give you a bit more confidence about what's happening. So I think we've actually, unfortunately, listeners, reached the end of the show. So thank you so much, Peggy, for being our guest today. And if our listeners want to get a hold of you, or they're interested in any of your books, where should they go?
First of all, thank you, Leslie and Corey. This has really been a joy being with you today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I would love to support your listeners. They can go to my 3minutes2destress.com and download the free audio and use it. If they'd like more about my book, they can go to escapefromanxiety.com, or for the Embodying the Power of the Zero Stress Zone, they can just go to stonewaterstudiobooks.com.
Thank you so much. Listeners, you've been listening to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. We're here on CIVL every Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m., broadcasting across the Fraser Valley, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us. You've been listening to another Unlocking Your Truth podcast by Dr. Leslie Phillips. For more information, go to our website at drlesleyphillips.com. That's drlesleyphillips.com, where you can ask questions or send her an email, and there's many free gifts on there for you as well. Come back again.